You are being lied to about how your Ford F-150 protects itself, and that lie is slowly draining thousands of dollars out of your bank account every single day you drive it. Ford wants you to believe that the factory computer calibrations and default vehicle settings inside your truck are meticulously optimized for maximum component longevity, fuel efficiency, and seamless operation. But here is the hard mechanical truth from 15 years on the shop floor. The overwhelming majority of these default parameters are engineered strictly to pass EPA emissions testing and satisfy corporate average fuel economy mandates, leaving your engine, your transmission, and your drivetrain components hanging out to dry under severe thermal and mechanical stress. Today, I am exposing 4 factory settings and features programmed into your F-150 that are causing hidden damage, waste, and mechanical inefficiency without you knowing. Setting number 4 is silently cooking your transmission fluid long before you ever cross a service interval. And setting number 1 is so deceptive that you actually think it is saving your engine when it is doing the exact opposite. Let's get into it. Setting number 5, the factory aggressive deceleration fuel cutoff and shift scheduling strategy. When you drive your F-150, you assume that letting off the throttle on a downhill grade or during a normal highway slowdown is a harmless way to save a few drops of fuel. Ford programs the powertrain control module to immediately drop fuel delivery to 0 injectors during deceleration and command high gear lockup to drag the engine against compression, all in the name of squeezing out an extra fraction of a mile per gallon on the window sticker. What Ford does not advertise is how this aggressive deceleration strategy shocks your driveline components with sudden torsional spikes. When the heavy rotating mass of the engine is abruptly forced to act as a braking anchor against a locked-up torque converter and a rigid differential, those rotational forces travel straight down the drive shaft, hammering the ring and pinion gear teeth and sending repetitive shock loads through the transmission output shaft splines and clutch hub damping springs. Over tens of thousands of miles of city commuting, this constant microshock hammering wears the splines out of alignment, creates excessive backlash in the rear differential, and accelerates fatigue fractures in your transmission's internal hard parts. You feel it as a subtle clunk or hesitation when you roll back onto the throttle after coasting, but you dismiss it as normal truck behavior. It is not normal. It is factory-programmed mechanical abuse. What you should do instead is completely free. Alter your driving inputs by anticipating stops smoothly, and if you are towing or hauling heavy loads, manually lock out higher overdrive gears or engage tow-haul mode to prevent the computer from hunting and snapping your driveline components back and forth between aggressive fuel cut deceleration and abrupt throttle re-engagement. Setting 4 is one that Ford markets as an advanced fuel-saving innovation, but under certain conditions, it is creating the exact environment that destroys your engine's cylinder walls. We are talking about the factory automated auto start-stop feature programmed into every modern EcoBoost and V8 F-150. Ford tells you that shutting off the engine at every red light or heavy traffic standstill is a brilliant eco-friendly solution that reduces city fuel consumption by up to 5% and cuts idle emissions. But here is the catastrophic reality that I pull out of engines on my teardown bench every single week. Engine wear does not happen when an engine is running at a stable operating temperature with a pressurized hydrodynamic oil wedge separating the journal bearings. Engine wear happens almost exclusively during the fraction of a second when the engine starts up, before oil pressure has fully built up to flood the main and rod bearings. Every single time your F-150 shuts off at a traffic light and automatically refires 3 minutes later, your crankshaft journals, momentarily metal to metal, scrape against your bearing shells, while the oil pump scrambles to reprime the galleries. Furthermore, during stop-and-go city gridlock, your oil temperature spikes while coolant flow drops because the water pump stops spinning entirely, thinning out your oil viscosity right at the worst possible moment when starting torque is highest. The result? Accelerated bearing wear, premature timing chain tensioner fatigue due to repetitive oil pressure fluctuations, and scored cylinder walls from fuel wash during unheated combustion cycles. Ford built this feature to appease federal regulators, but your engine pays the mechanical penalty in premature wear. What you should do instead is build a permanent muscle memory habit. The absolute second you start your truck, reach down and press the physical start-stop deactivation button on your dash, or install a plug-and-play memory module that keeps it permanently disabled. You will trade a negligible amount of fuel for thousands of dollars in saved bearing and starter longevity. We have already exposed how Ford's factory deceleration and start-stop strategies sacrifice your physical drivetrain hardware just to hit arbitrary federal emissions targets on a window sticker. But those are only the baseline irritants compared to the deep, silent software traps waiting inside your engine bay. Setting number 3. The factory adaptive octane mapping and ignition timing retard strategy. When you roll up to the fuel pump with your EcoBoost F-150, you probably assume that filling up with regular 87 octane fuel is a harmless way to save $5 or $10 per tank, because the owner's manual explicitly states that regular fuel is acceptable and the engine management computer will automatically adjust. Ford markets this flexibility as a major consumer benefit, reassuring you that advanced NOx sensors will seamlessly dial back ignition timing whenever lower-grade fuel is detected. What Ford omits in the glossy marketing brochures is the brutal mechanical tax your engine pays every single time those NOx sensors are forced to intervene under load. When you dump 87 octane into a high-compression, twin-turbocharged EcoBoost engine and put your foot down to pass traffic or pull a grade, the fuel-air mixture detonates prematurely against the piston crown, a destructive shockwave known as pre-ignition or spark knock. The powertrain control module instantly reacts by aggressively pulling up to 6 to 8 degrees of ignition timing out of the cylinders to suppress the pinging, saving the piston from immediate catastrophic destruction. But here is the hidden mechanical truth. While timing retard stops the audible knock, it turns your combustion chambers into miniature blast furnaces. Because the spark happens later in the cycle, the burning fuel charge is compressed against exhaust valves that are already opening, sending massive thermal spikes directly into your cylinders' heads, turbocharger, turbine wheels, and catalytic converters. I have pulled spark plugs out of regular fuel EcoBoost engines with melted ground electrodes and cracked porcelain insulators before the vehicle even hit 60,000 miles. All because the engine management computer spent its entire life fighting low-grade fuel with aggressive timing retard. Furthermore, your horsepower and torque output drop by upwards of 10 to 15%, meaning you are burning more fuel volume to achieve the same acceleration while generating exponentially more destructive heat. What you should do instead is stop treating your turbocharged F-150 like a standard Civic commuter. Feed it 91 or 93 octane premium fuel religiously, especially if you tow or live in a hot climate. Because eliminating constant knock events preserves your piston rings, protects your turbochargers, and restores the exact power curve Ford engineered into the truck before they had to compromise for economy-class fuel budgets. Setting number 2 is one that Ford programs into the electronic brain of your transmission to protect your comfort, but it ends up destroying your clutch friction plates with a slow, invisible death. We are talking about the factory adaptive shift pressure and torque management smoothing logic programmed into both the 6R80 and the 10R80 automatic transmissions. Ford tells you that this advanced adaptive learning capability is designed to monitor your driving style and continuously adjust hydraulic pressure commands to ensure your gear changes remain butter smooth and imperceptible whether you are crawling through grocery store parking lots or merging onto the interstate. What Ford fails to tell you is how this adaptive software actually executes that smoothness. To eliminate the firm, mechanical shift feel that truck owners historically associated with heavy-duty capability, the transmission control module commands lower hydraulic line pressures during light to moderate throttle shifts, deliberately slipping the clutch packs for a fraction of a second longer to feather the engagement and mask the gear change. This intentional slip softens the shift feel, but it introduces massive amounts of localized friction heat right across the friction disc facings. Every single time your transmission slips its clutch packs to cushion a shift for your comfort, microscopic particles of paper and carbon friction material are sheared off the clutch plates and suspended into your transmission fluid. Over tens of thousands of cycles, this constant low-pressure slip glazed finishes the clutch discs, rounds off the sharp edges of your hydraulic control solenoids, and fills your valve body passages with abrasive friction debris. By the time you hit 80,000 miles, the adaptive software has adjusted line pressures to maximum limits just to compensate for worn-out, slipping clutches. And you are suddenly staring at a diagnostic trouble code for component slipping and a multi-thousand-dollar overhaul bill. What you should do instead is completely override the factory's comfort-biased software degradation by ditching the ridiculous lifetime fluid myth. Flush your transmission fluid and replace your external filter every 50,000 to 60,000 miles without fail using exact spec fluid, and every 20,000 miles. Perform a manual Keep Alive memory reset on the transmission control module using a professional scan tool to wipe out the lazy clutch slipping adaptive tables and force the computer to relearn crisp, firm, clutch-saving hydraulic pressures. We have already dismantled the factory traps hidden in your deceleration programming, your start-stop emissions strategies, your octane mapping, and your transmission's comfort-biased shift slipping. But those four pale in comparison to the single most destructive bank account emptying software parameter programmed into your modern Ford F-150. Setting number 1, the factory lifetime transmission fluid thermal management and zero maintenance strategy. Out of all the software routines and factory guidelines written into your truck's operational manual, this is the most deceptive, financially predatory setting of all. Because Ford actually convinces you that doing nothing is the best way to protect your investment. Ford programs the powertrain control module and publishes service literature stating that the specialized Mercon ULV fluid inside your 10R80 transmission is a lifetime fluid requiring no scheduled flushes, no filter changes, and no intervention whatsoever under normal operating conditions. They market this as a revolutionary maintenance-free engineering breakthrough that slashes your total cost of ownership to zero during the first 100,000 miles. But here is the catastrophic grease-stained mechanical reality I see on my workbench every single day. There is no such thing as a lifetime fluid, and Ford knows it. When you operate a modern half-ton truck under real-world conditions, towing heavy trailers up mountain grades, battling summer gridlock traffic, or letting the transmission run at its factory-calibrated operating threshold of 200 to 210 degrees Fahrenheit, that ultra-low viscosity fluid begins to break down chemically within 50,000 miles. The complex synthetic base stocks shear under extreme pressures, the anti-wear additive packages completely deplete, and the fluid loses its ability to handle boundary lubrication under high-load torque converter lockup. As the fluid degrades, it stops protecting the microscopic clearances inside your valve body, allowing abrasive clutch debris and metallic wear particles to circulate freely through the system, scoring aluminum valve bores and sticking shift solenoids until your transmission begins violently slamming into gear or shuddering uncontrollably at highway speeds. Ford designed this lifetime fluid interval exclusively to lower fleet maintenance averages and appeal to corporate buyers looking at paper-thin life cycle operating costs, leaving you holding the bag for a $6,000 rebuild right after your factory powertrain warranty expires. What you should do instead is completely reject the factory manual's dangerous lie. Take full control of your truck's destiny by flushing your transmission fluid and replacing the internal filter every 50,000 miles without exception, using exact specification Mercon fluid. The bottom line is crystal clear. Your Ford F-150 is an absolute powerhouse of modern engineering. But the corporate factory settings hidden deep inside its computer modules were never designed to give you 200,000 miles of trouble-free ownership. They were designed to balance emissions ledgers, lower corporate warranty liabilities, and keep assembly lines moving. When you stop blindly trusting manufacturer marketing claims and start managing your truck with the hard-nosed discipline of a veteran technician. You strip away the vulnerabilities that drain bank accounts and turn a ticking time bomb into a genuinely bulletproof workhorse. Stop letting factory shortcuts dictate your maintenance schedule. Check your build sheet. Override the computer's lazy defaults with proactive fluid services and manual habits. And keep your hard-earned money out of the dealership repair bay where it belongs.